This is the South China Sea. Roughly 1/3 of all global maritime trade occurs in these waters. Yet, if you were to take a look at the ships traversing these waters, the majority are actually not owned or operated by China. In fact, most of these ships are run by Singapore, South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. And most of these ships are what you'd expect. Some are oil tankers that import oil from the Middle East, some are bulk carriers that carry over 100,000 tons of bulk items like coal or grain, and some are container ships, transporting your latest impulse purchase from Temu to your front door anywhere in the world. And these ships are all normal, and are being run in the same way that ships have been running for, well, the past few thousand years. Crew loads the cargo onto the ship is then checked for clearance by technicians of the Port Authority. The ship then departs the port and the captain navigates the open seas for days or even weeks on end. Then the ship gets boarded by pirates, safely travels to its destination where it docks and unloads the cargo. And virtually all ships have done this routine for thousands of years. Until recently, when an old maritime tradition began getting turned on its head. You see, there are two ships near the South China Sea and one other one in Northern Europe that might transform the entire industry and shift the power of global shipping. And one of the countries looking to do this is Japan, a nation that once transformed its entire maritime force from an outdated, rustic fleet that was laughed at into arguably the most advanced and powerful fleet in the world, and it might do it once again with this new invention. And to explain that, let me fill you in on Japan's maritime history. In the early 1800s, Japan was falling behind the Western powers in its economic, militaristic, and naval capabilities. You see, Japan was essentially a rural feudal society at the time, when the Western world was already well into the Industrial Revolution. But then, its new emperor, Meiji, took power in 1867, and the fate of Japan and the world would change forever. After the Meiji Restoration in 1868, which essentially consolidated the power of Japan into the emperor's hands, Japan didn't just dip its toe into modernization, it dove headfirst. British naval architects were a hot ticket back in the day, and so Japan got some of them, helping Japan paddle from feudal canoes to steam-powered battleships. What was the goal of this? Well, it was to avoid becoming another notch on the colonial belt of the Western world, and instead become a major player at the world's military poker table. In the early 1900s, Japan's naval resume quickly filled up with wins against China and Russia, turning its navy into the darling of the region. These victories were like putting out a regional "We've arrived" sign, signaling its presence as the new heavyweight on the Asian bloc. However, the other global powers decided to cool down the naval arms race with the Washington Naval Treaty, which was the maritime equivalent of telling everyone to, chill out a little bit and stop building so many battleships. Japan, feeling shortchanged by the deal, reluctantly agreed but wasn't happy about it. It did not want to have its naval wings clipped. Fast forward a little bit, with nationalism as the new trend in the 1920s and 1930s, Japan started to ignore the "please stop building these evil battleships" memo, and kept churning out battleships and carriers as if they were going out of style. The country was clearly gearing up for significant expansion, and its navy was the trump card. World War II rolls around, and the Imperial Japanese Navy, now beefed up and ready to rumble, kicked off its Pacific tour with the surprise gig at Pearl Harbor, bringing the US into the war with a bang. However, over the next few years, the Allies destroyed pretty much Japan's entire navy, and after Japan's surrender in 1945, the Allied forces essentially grounded the once mighty Imperial Japanese Navy. You see, post-war, Japan's shipping industry was completely decimated, and they had very little naval ships left. However, their engineers, the commercial industry, and naval knowledge did not go away. And so, after World War II, the Japanese did a full genre switch from military to commercial ships. This pivot helped Japan dominate the global shipbuilding charts for decades, crafting ships that are less about firepower and more about cargo space and fuel efficiency. That was until the rise of China, where China from the 1980s onwards went from a relatively tiny maritime power in the region to the largest player in Southeast Asia. And all of a sudden, Japan, once again, was looking at ways to innovate to keep up with the growing superpower of the world. And so we reach the port of Tokyo in 2022. At this time, a new Japanese ship had emerged from the port with a carrying capacity of just under 1,000 tons, which is not quite a lot. But this ship was not about the tonnage, it's about the ship's technology. Its name is the Suzaku, and what made its maiden voyage so special was that it did not obey the same 4,000-year-old shipping traditions of the world. And why was that? Well, it was because there wasn't a single person on board to operate the ship, minus a few people like technicians or engineers just in case there was some sort of emergency. This ship had 98% of its entire maiden voyage be purely automated. No human interaction, no direction, nothing. It was just set with an automated goal of traveling the Sea of Japan to deliver some cargo. And the trip was a massive success. And why was this so important? Well, you can look at it from a few different perspectives, the largest of which is purely economic. You see, shipping is actually a game of cost, and strangely enough, the two times in recent history when shipping costs have spiked have been briefly after 2020, during the pandemic, when the entire world shut down and so did the shipping industry. That's understandable. But the second time it happened is right now, where shipping costs around the world are spiking in a very similar way to that during the pandemic. So why is this? Well, some of the spike has been attributed to things like a rise in oil prices and a rebound in the manufacturing industry. But it really started because of attacks on ships aiming to go through the Suez Canal since the start of the Israel-Palestine conflict. You see, the Suez Canal is a wonder of the world. Roughly 15% of all maritime trade in the world goes through this canal in Egypt. However, since the outbreak of the ship attacks, the number has dropped by 42%, meaning almost half as many ships are taking the Suez Canal route as compared to before the Israel-Palestine conflict. But that brings up the question, where are these ships going if they are not going through the Suez Canal? Well, one example for a normal route for a ship to go through the Suez Canal is one from, let's say, Shenzhen, China to the port of Piraeus in Greece. With the Suez Canal, that route is about 13,000 kilometers. But without the Suez Canal, ships are being forced to travel around Africa to get to their destination, meaning the same trip would be about 28,000 kilometers, more than doubling the distance and increasing the total cost of the trip by anywhere from 30 to 60%. And this cost increase comes from extra fuel and refueling needed, the extra cost of needing to pay and supply all of their employees for potentially a few extra weeks of work for a single shipment. And so, with these rising costs, that is where a ship like the Suzaku may be stepping in. It's estimated that automated ships like the Suzaku could reduce potential shipping costs by upwards of 30% in the near future, and with advancements from other ships like the Yara Birkeland in Norway, which is another automated ship that runs solely on electricity and not oil, we might soon see a nation like Japan or Norway take the lead in creating the most advanced ships in the world. And simultaneously, Greece, which depending on which metric you use, might still be the top player in the global shipping race, they have been producing their own litany of automated ship companies, and have actually made massive partnerships with Japan. One company called Deep Sea has been shown to reduce shipping costs between 7 and 10% by solely having AI provide perfect up-to-date speed plans and sea routes for the ships. So what we might be seeing right now is another innovation war. Japan partnering up with Greece and creating the most advanced ships in the world for both nations might actually sustain their global dominance in shipping. I mean, these are two of the top 3 nations in the world for shipping. Some have China at number 1, some have China at number 3, but regardless, Greece, Japan, and China are the top 3 players. And having Greece and Japan work together on making the most modern fleet in the world is like having Kevin Durant join the Golden State Warriors to take down LeBron James. It could become a partnership so great that not even China could catch up in time to compete with these modern ships. Now, it is worth noting, however, that China has announced that they are working on their own automated ships, but most of their efforts seem to be focused solely on military automated vessels, which is kind of what the United States is doing as well. Regardless, the world's shipping is on the brink of a revolution, where we are seeing fully electric, automated, and AI-navigated ships beginning to set sail in the world's seas. There is potential in the near future with these innovations to reduce shipping costs by well over 50%, and hopefully that'll reach us consumers. Because man, life is pretty expensive right now. But who knows, maybe Japan, once again, will revolutionize the shipbuilding industry and keep the superpower of China at bay. And if you liked this video, make sure to click on my documentaries playlist where I have a ton of other videos just like this on there. And hit that like and subscribe button, it means a lot to me. And hit that notification bell when you want to see my next video. But anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in my next video in just a few seconds.